Today we're going to touch bases on endangered species. And this morning I woke up to a very sad news to learn that Brazilian rainforest is still being burned. Every year during the dry season in South America, which is about this time when the wet season is happening here in Costa Rica, it's pretty dry in that region of South America. And of course, people take advantage of the opportunity to start slashing and burning the tropical rainforest. This is being systematically done for years since the opening of the Trans-Amazonic Highway in 1952 and its branches that lead to different regions of the Amazon. Every year, an area about the size of almost this country, about the size of West Virginia, is destroyed in that region of the world. As we've learned in some of our videos, the complexity of tropical rainforest leads to find within these fine and fabulous ecosystems very fine specialist animals that have evolved in the course of time to become so uniquely specialized to deal with certain kinds of plants that when you inflict a very little amount of damage to the forest, definitely you will put those species in danger. Today, the scientific community uses very charismatic animals in order to gain awareness and interest of the general public, in order to not only draw their attention into the subject, but also to try to save these fabulous creatures from their potential extinction. Animals that are located at the top of the food chain, meaning that these are animals that feed on other animals, that feed on plants, right? So the most commonly found creature in the forest are definitely insects because they have the ability to feed on plants. And then we have animals that feed on those insects, right? Which are more, well, less common than insects, but they're common. And of course, we have animals that feed on those animals. And of course, as you climb these notches of the trophic chain, you start losing a lot of energy. And by the time you get to the last notch of the trophic chain, where you find top predators like jaguars and lions and snow leopards and harpy eagles and those, of course, you just heard stories about them. People have seldom seen them, and usually the only way to see these animals is just by using trap cameras and trails like this. But these animals are top predators. The abundance of prey in a tropical rainforest is limited. In fact, we've gone through these woods and we yet haven't seen the obvious presence of animals. In order to obtain their prey, these predators, flying predators of land or land predators, occupy huge areas in order to obtain the necessary food for their basic subsistence. Loss of habitat is probably the major cause of the extinction of many animals, and of course is happening very rapidly as we speak, and probably many species will go extinct by the middle of this century. Jaguars in Costa Rica, for example, are badly jeopardized because of excessive poaching, which is a big problem that happens in Costa Rica. Not that much for the loss of habitat because it's pretty much under control due to our national park system and other environmental services that Costa Rica is actually dealing with. But poaching is yet a silent problem that happens everywhere, in which people go after game that is primary resource for jaguars. So of course the jaguar population is on the decline, not only in Costa Rica but as well in South America. It's probably one of the most threatened felines you can find anywhere in the world. Um, in other areas, not that much in Costa Rica, but for example in South America, um, and we don't even talk. We're not even talking about top of the food chain. We're talking about monkeys, right? Monkeys feed on fruit, leaves, insects, and other matter. So they're not at the top of the food chain. So they're relatively abundant. But when people systematically destroy rainforest, they are destroying the habitat of primates that will have or will suffer tremendous consequences um, because of the loss of their habitats. Monkeys require this kind of spatial distribution of plants and trees in order to not only look for their food but also to acquire mobility throughout the canopy of, of the forest, not only of the forest floor but also of the forest interior. The myriad of lianas and vines, the intertwined crowns of trees will facilitate the mobility of these primates, and in absence of it, of course, they will have a problem. They will have a problem finding food, and they will have a mobility problem that probably will compromise some of their populations. In South America, we have small monkeys called tamarins. The northernmost distribution of tamarins in Central America is south of the Panama Canal, not in Costa Rica. Costa Rica, we primarily have cebids, which are bigger sized monkeys. But the tamarins are tiny monkeys, about the size of a tablet, and their livelihood depends on a fairly big sized tree, and they live in that tree throughout their entire lives, and they go nowhere else simply because the tree produces exactly what these monkeys need. So they travel very little. If someone come and cuts the tree for lumber, they will be definitely destroying a population of tamarins that probably, depending on circumstances, could have difficulties to survive um, elsewhere. Talk about rhinoceros. Talk about lemurs in Madagascar. I mean, you name it. Bird species. There are hundreds of bird species that are threatened because of habitat loss, hunting, um, and of course because of cultural reasons. A lot of people in Asia, for example, um, have the belief of eating animal parts simply because it's part of their culture. And these things are driving stuff extinct. Elephants, rhinoceros, and many others are witness of that kind of market. When we lose a species, we're losing. It's pretty much like talking about having banks accounts, different banks accounts, and every time the humanity loses a species, we're losing one of those banks accounts. And progressively, we will be losing all of our banks accounts, and at the end, we will lose all we have. Tropical rainforests um, are reservoirs of the most fundamental resources we need for our own survival. And if we destroy them, we will never be able to replace them again. Um, Huge rainforests are being destroyed in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, parts of Central America, Africa, and Asia. And unfortunately, most of the people who destroy rainforests are even corrupted politicians in these countries. Um, we have some fashion of organized crime to um, manage the systematic destruction of rainforest and putting all these species endangered. So the next thing we're going to talk about is definitely conservation in the tropics. These two issues kind of go together, and of course this is what we're going to be touching bases with in our next video. So stay with us.